friends. I'm your Vitamin girl.
Lucy.
Lucy.
Lucy! Miss McGillicuddy.
Ricky, this is it.
This is
This is it!
Let's go!
It was the most watched television show of the 1950s, a comedy that captured the hearts of millions and set the gold standard for sitcoms. But behind the laughter, there was a secret. A scene so controversial, so daring for its time, that television executives refused to let it air. For decades, it was hidden from audiences. This is the story of I Love Lucy and the banned moment that changed TV forever. The show that changed everything. In the early 1950s, television was still a novelty. Families across America were just beginning to bring the glowing box into their homes. Programming was simple, often live, and rarely preserved. And then came I Love Lucy. Premiering in 1951, I Love Lucy quickly became the most watched show on television. It wasn't just popular, it was revolutionary. The series was filmed in front of a live studio audience, captured with multiple cameras, and preserved on high-quality film. That decision, pushed by Desi Arnaz, meant episodes could be rerun, a concept virtually unheard of at the time. Syndication, as we know it today, owes much to I Love Lucy. Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz were more than co-stars. They were husband and wife, bringing their real-life marriage to America's living rooms each week. Their relationship challenged expectations. Desi, a Cuban immigrant and band leader, was paired romantically with Lucy, a red-headed Hollywood comedian. At a time when interracial relationships were rarely depicted on screen, their marriage stood as a bold, if subtle, statement. But more than anything, audiences tuned in for the comedy. Lucy's physical gags, her impeccable timing, and her willingness to look foolish set a new standard for sitcoms. Week after week, millions of viewers laughed as Lucy got herself into trouble, from grape-stomping misadventures in Italy to crashing Ricky's nightclub shows, to that unforgettable chocolate factory conveyor belt. By 1952, I Love Lucy was topping the Nielsen ratings. At its peak, more than 60% of American households with televisions tuned in. In an era before streaming, before DVRs, before even videotape, this was a communal event. America laughed together, at the same time, on the same night. Television had never seen anything like it. But behind the laughter was a team constantly navigating the rules of broadcast television. In the early 1950s, the Federal Communications Commission, advertisers, and network censors maintained strict control over what could and could not be shown. Words, themes, even the suggestion of certain ideas were heavily policed. Television was expected to uphold an idealized version of American life, clean, moral, and free from controversy. Lucy and Desi knew those boundaries all too well. As performers and producers, they pushed the limits of what was acceptable, often sneaking in jokes, references, and scenarios that made censors uneasy. Their ability to dance along that fine line between propriety and provocation became part of the show's charm. But it also put them directly in the crosshairs of network executives. For audiences, I Love Lucy was pure entertainment. For the television industry, it was a cultural earthquake. The show's success proved that sitcoms could dominate ratings, shape public opinion, and even shift cultural norms. But with that power came scrutiny. Every script, every line, every gesture was examined for possible offense, and soon the censors would find themselves facing a challenge unlike anything they had encountered before. Because behind the laughter, behind the innovation, behind the glamorous Hollywood marriage, there was a storyline that would test the very limits of what television was willing to show. A storyline that would be banned, censored, and hidden from audiences for decades. Television censorship in the 1950s.
Well, Marion, nothing personal, but I think that's the silliest looking hat I've ever seen.
Oh, now, come on, Lucy. Tell me what you think of it.
I am serious. It's horrible.
In the early years of television, the medium was still finding its footing. But one thing was clear. There were strict limits on what could be shown. The rise of TV was matched by the tightening grip of censorship, where what you saw, and even what you said, was governed by a lot of moral codes. Television in the 1950s was not just about entertainment. It was also about shaping the moral landscape of the nation. The American public looked to TV not only for laughs, but for a reflection of their idealized world, orderly, clean, and family-friendly. As a result, the networks and advertisers put strict regulations in place to control content. The result was the creation of a moral code that restricted what could be said, shown, or even suggested. Language was one of the first things monitored. Words like pregnant, divorce, and even curse words were considered unspeakable. Anything that hinted at immorality, uncleanliness, or sexuality was banned. The television networks required that all scripts be reviewed by censors, and any mention of topics like drug use, infidelity, or violence had to be carefully avoided or sanitized. TV was meant to be a shining example of the American dream, not a reflection of society's problems. But even as the television industry grew, so did the creativity of its stars. Shows like I Love Lucy pushed the boundaries of what was acceptable, even if it meant walking right up to the line or stepping over it. And when it came to the subject of pregnancy, that line would be put to the test. Pregnancy, especially a woman's pregnancy, was considered too taboo for television. In this kind of space where grown adult-sized women, were expected to be pure and chaste, the very idea of showing a pregnancy on TV seemed dangerously provocative. In fact, the word pregnant was rarely spoken, even in real life, much less in a scripted comedy. Women were expected to be mothers, but the process of becoming one, well, that was something best kept behind closed doors. Television executives were particularly cautious when it came to the depiction of family life. Scenes that suggested intimacy or even a woman's body changing were too controversial. A simple word like pregnant was considered offensive by the standards of the time and was enough to unair a show. So when Lucy Ricardo announced she was expecting on I Love Lucy, it was a subtle euphemism, but one that still made waves. Even though the pregnancy was an integral part of the show's storyline, it had to be hidden behind carefully worded scripts. By the time Lucy was pregnant in real life, the networks were already walking on eggshells. Lucy's pregnancy was going to be written into the show, but how? Desi Arnaz and Lucy's producers made a calculated decision. They would follow the social norms of the time and not speak the word pregnant. Instead, they'd refer to it as expecting. This careful wording was designed to avoid offending viewers. And yet, the very idea of a woman being visibly pregnant on television was enough to make some network executives vomit on their laps. Lucy's pregnancy storyline wasn't just a challenge for the writers, it was a test for the censors. Despite their best efforts to sanitize the content, the issue of pregnancy on TV was still a sensitive subject. The very notion that a woman, even a fictional one, would be shown as expecting was considered audacious, risky, and, for some, downright scandalous. But there was more to this than just the word pregnant. In 1952, I Love Lucy was about to make history with a scene that would forever change how television dealt with issues of family and intimacy. Because this was not just about the idea of a woman's body changing. It was about changing the way the American public thought about what could be shown on TV. And the network's reaction would reveal just how far they were willing to go to keep things acceptable. Continue watching. The band scene.
Hi, Lucy. What did the doctor say? Ethel, we're going to have a baby. We are?
It was one of the most famous TV moments of the 1950s, and yet it nearly didn't air at all. In the fall of 1952, I Love Lucy would attempt something unprecedented, addressing the topic of pregnancy, but not just any pregnancy. Lucy Ricardo was expecting a child, and the show would air it in real time, as Lucy Ball herself was pregnant.
Honey, now what is it?
Ricky, darling.
Honey, the phone is ringing.
I know it.
Well, honey, one of us has to get up and answer it.
No!
You see, when Lucille Ball and her husband, Desi Arnaz, found out they were expecting their second child, they feared it would spell the end of I Love Lucy, as it was considered inappropriate for a visibly pregnant woman to appear on television. And the word pregnant was even deemed too vulgar to say on air. The couple was prepared to cancel the show, but Jess Oppenheimer, the show's producer and head writer, proposed a groundbreaking idea. Why not write Lucille's pregnancy into the storyline? This was a daring move, as no pregnant woman had ever been portrayed on television or stage before. Eventually, CBS agreed to feature Lucille's pregnancy on screen, but with strict conditions. The network executives were concerned about how the public might react and wanted to avoid any potential backlash. To ease their concerns, they arranged for a priest, a minister, and a rabbi to review the episodes that depicted Lucille's pregnancy before they were broadcast. The scene that was about to unfold would become one of the most controversial in television history. The scene in question came in December 8, 1952, in the episode titled Lucy is enceinte, a French term meaning with child. Lucy and Ricky are at a nightclub, where Lucy nervously tries to tell him the big news. But in true Lucy fashion, things don't go according to plan. In a comedic twist, Ricky misinterprets her clues, creating the familiar chaos that audiences loved. It's a hilarious and heartfelt moment, but that wasn't the problem. The real issue lay in the fact that Lucy was, in fact, pregnant on screen.
We'll bring the couple up here and I'll sing it right to them, man. Come on, let's bring them up on the floor. Come on, folks. Come on, we're just trying to wish you luck. Who is it?
Even though the show had been carefully edited to avoid the word pregnant, the very nature of Lucy's condition made some executives uncomfortable. The network, CBS, and its affiliates were now in a position to decide whether this was too much for their audience. It was one of the first times in television history that pregnancy, especially a woman's physical pregnancy, was openly acknowledged in such a public way. Some networks were so nervous that they outright refused to air the episode. Others chose to cut the scene altogether. It was a scene that threatened to shake the foundations of T-Fi, and for some, it was too bold. After all, this wasn't just a storyline about a woman having a baby. This was about a woman's body, her changing form, and the very idea of motherhood being discussed on the small screen. The reaction from the audience was electric when it finally aired. On January 19, 1953, the episode aired live, and millions of viewers tuned in to see Lucy reveal her pregnancy. The moment was a major breakthrough, but it was also a gamble for the networks. But the gamble paid off. Over 44 million people watched the episode, setting a new record for viewership. It was a stunning success. Despite these precautions, the episodes were a massive success and marked a pivotal moment in television history. They showed that audiences were ready for more realistic and relatable portrayals of family life. This landmark decision helped pave the way for more honest representations of personal and family issues on TV. The controversy that had surrounded the pregnancy storyline quickly gave way to celebration. But it didn't end there. The shockwave was coming. This scene would still have repercussions in the years to come. Despite its success, the episode wasn't immediately embraced by all. The very same scene that captivated millions was avoided by syndication networks for years. What had been considered too risque was now a cultural milestone. But why? What made this scene so difficult to air again? And why would it take decades for it to be truly accepted? The fallout and reaction.
Hey, Geffel, a little plain dress like this couldn't cost more than $100.
Well, it better not cost more than $100, because that's all Ricky said you could spend. And if it's more than that, I'd hate to be around when he... Oh!
January 19th, 1953. The night Lucy Ricardo's pregnancy was finally revealed to the world. What had been a subject of anxiety, censorship, and controversy became one of the most watched television moments of the decade. As Lucy nervously delivered her news to Ricky, millions of American families sat at home, captivated by this historic moment. The episode Lucy is Enceinte didn't just make history because of its subject matter. It made history because of the overwhelming audience response. In fact, the viewership was so intriguing that it surpassed the viewers who watched President Eisenhower's inauguration just a few days earlier. The ratings weren't just big, they were unprecedented. In an era where televisions were still relatively new, where families crowded into living rooms to watch their favorite shows together, this episode drew a larger audience than any other entertainment event up until that time. For the network, it was a triumph.
Not Lucy. When she gets pregnant, brother, there's no question about it.
Newspapers the following day were filled with praise for the episode. The public had embraced Lucy's pregnancy, a topic once considered too daring for TV. What had seemed like a bold risk had, in fact, become a defining moment in television history. The episode became a cultural milestone, a moment when the medium of television proved that it could handle the big, important topics of life. But the real surprise came from the public's reaction. For years, television had adhered to strict standards of family values, and the idea of a woman being openly pregnant on a show seemed radical. Yet, when the moment finally arrived, it felt natural. It felt real. Lucy wasn't just a character on TV, she was an extension of the audience, a woman facing the same life-changing experiences that real viewers were going through. Viewers didn't just see a woman on TV, they saw someone they could relate to. This was about more than comedy. This was about shared experiences, about breaking down the walls of taboo and allowing the real world to enter the fictional one. The cultural shift had begun. And with it, I Love Lucy had once again changed the television landscape. She changed TV history. She was pregnant on TV, went into labor on TV, even when they tried to write her off. She said, "Y'all, this is my show." In real life, Lucy was also expecting a child. Her pregnancy wasn't just a plot device, it was a reflection of her own life. She and Desi had a son in 1953, just as the storyline was unfolding. Their son, Desiderio Alberto Arnaz IV, also known as Desi Arnaz Jr., has grown to be a retired actor and musician, still receiving love from his parents' fans worldwide. The authenticity of Lucy's portrayal gave the show a sense of relatability that deepened its impact. The birth episode aired just a few months later, in March 1953. With over 71% of the television audience tuning in, it set another record for viewership. Lucy giving birth to Desi Jr. on TV wasn't just a ratings success, it was a cultural event. The very thing that had been seen as inappropriate and taboo became the moment that made I Love Lucy a household name. But the success wasn't just measured in numbers. It was measured in the way the American public embraced the idea of seeing real-life experiences on television, and the emotional connection they felt with Lucy Ricardo, who wasn't just a character anymore, but a part of their lives. America had witnessed something unprecedented, and they loved it. Lucy's pregnancy had gone from a controversial subject to a groundbreaking achievement, and the world was watching as history was made. Why it was banned for so long.
It can't be.
Despite the overwhelming success of the pregnancy storyline, the aftermath wasn't as simple as a victory lap. While the audience had embraced the boldness of the moment, the networks were far less eager to celebrate. I Love Lucy had just changed television, but in the years that followed, that very same scene would be avoided, suppressed, and even hidden from viewers. The reason for this wasn't just about television ratings or audience reception. It was rooted in the conservative values that still dominated American television, and the fears that many executives had about airing a storyline that dealt so openly with a woman's pregnancy.
You don't suppose...
I don't suppose what?
You don't suppose you're gonna have a baby?
After all, I Love Lucy had pushed boundaries from the start. But the topic of pregnancy was still considered too much for some. The very idea of a woman, even a fictional character like Lucy, being visibly pregnant on screen felt like a break from the status quo. For many, it was as though I Love Lucy had crossed a line, and the consequences were clear. Networks feared backlash from conservative audiences who might find the subject matter offensive or even inappropriate. Advertisers even feared a focus on the issue might upset conservative audiences because it would explicitly acknowledge the existence and consequences of intimate relations. The birth episode, for example, was a ratings success. But even then, the networks were cautious about running the pregnancy-related episodes again. While they had aired for the first time, reruns were another story. The sheer anxiety of airing such scenes again and again kept many networks from including them in regular syndication. Even after the initial success, many channels chose to avoid rebroadcasting these episodes, worried about the reactions of their most conservative audiences. One major worry about showing pregnancy on TV was it would, by necessity, imply intimate activity. Television networks were so apprehensive about such an association, Lucy and Ricky Ricardo didn't even sleep in the same bed. The first known TV couple to sleep in the same bed was on a 1947 to 1950 show called Johnny and Mary Kay, which starred real-life couple Johnny and Mary Kay Stearns. Syndication networks began to systematically avoid the pregnancy episodes. The episodes featuring Lucy's pregnancy and the birth of her child were omitted from reruns for decades. The fear was that airing them would alienate advertisers, push away audiences who weren't ready for such progressive content, and potentially jeopardize the clean, family-friendly image that TV was built upon. Public opinion was still deeply divided on issues like sex, pregnancy, and morality. In the 1950s, American television was largely governed by advertisers, whose interests often aligned with the desire to maintain a very specific, idealized version of family life. For advertisers, keeping content safe and suitable for the whole family was paramount. The idea of airing an episode where a woman's pregnancy was central to the plot wasn't just a step into new territory, it was a risk to everything that television was supposed to represent. And so, while I Love Lucy had shattered records and made history in 1953, the pregnancy storyline was buried. Its cultural importance couldn't be ignored, but its presence in reruns would be avoided for years. For over a decade, networks hesitated to show it again, and many never did. In fact, it wasn't until the late 1960s that reruns of I Love Lucy finally began to include the pregnancy episodes. But even then, they were often edited or altered to remove any direct references to Lucy's pregnancy. For years, what had been a groundbreaking moment was treated like an afterthought, a relic of a more radical time. Television had changed by the late 1960s, and with it, societal attitudes toward what was acceptable to air on the screen. By then, the taboo that surrounded pregnancy on TV had begun to fade. But it took a decade of societal shifts, changing public attitudes, and a new generation of executives before the full impact of Lucy's pregnancy could be appreciated in its entirety. What was once seen as inappropriate became a pivotal moment in television history. The very episodes that were once banned, censored, and avoided became a symbol of how far television had come, and how much further it still had to go. The legacy of Lucy's scene. What was once deemed scandalous became celebrated as one of television's greatest moments. For decades, Lucy Ricardo's pregnancy storyline remained a symbol of how far television had come, and how much further it still had to go. It was a defining moment that pushed boundaries, challenged the status quo, and paved the way for future generations of shows and characters to tackle bold, real-life subjects. Today, I Love Lucy is remembered not just for its laughter, but for its legacy. The show's groundbreaking decisions, from filming in front of a live audience to depicting the realities of marriage and pregnancy, set a new standard for sitcoms and TV as a whole. What was once hidden from view, what was once considered too much, is now celebrated as a milestone in television history. Lucy's scene was banned for decades, but when the world finally saw it, it changed television forever. Because I Love Lucy wasn't just comedy, it was history in the making. We hope you enjoyed this video. Stay tuned for more amazing stories.